Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Chitheads. My guest today is Angela Warburton. Angela has been treating, educating, and empowering people about their healthcare since 2001. In her private practice as clinical director of urban wellness, as a faculty member at the Institute of Traditional Medicine in Toronto, a frequent workshop presenter and lecturer including the University of Toronto, and a regular expert guest on the Stephen and Chris Show, Angela brings her enthusiasm and expertise to educate, inspire, and empower people in every medium possible. Having a background in health sciences studying nutrition and dietetics at McGill University, a degree in psychology, as well as her extensive and ongoing training in traditional Chinese medicine, Angela pulls from her diverse background to offer the wisdom of traditional medicines combined with the most up-to-date, relevant, and impactful options available for her patients and students. Angela has additional training in applied mindfulness-based meditation and runs a weekly mindful meditation group out of her clinic in Toronto. Whether it be educating and inspiring people about food and nutrition, mental and emotional healing, or just general wellness, Angela's whole person-based approach to wellness aims to leave people inspired, feeling better, and with a practical group of customized tips and tools for their life. Angela is passionate about helping people achieve their optimum state of health, vitality, and well-being through mind, body, and spirit. So with that, hello, Angela. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So I'm really excited to talk to you today about Chinese medicine, this is going to be the first episode where we've explored that topic. So I'm really looking forward to it. But before we get into the topics that we're going to explore, I'd love to hear a little bit about your own story and what led you to the work that you do.
Yeah, great, thanks. It's interesting. I guess I was ripe for the Chinese medicine, but it was really through my own health issue that I got here. And I had, as you mentioned, a background. I studied psychology and thought, obviously the power of our mind and what we think is so important to our health. But then I thought it's just limited. And then I kind of got interested in the body and food and nutrition. And so I studied Western dietetics and nutrition. And it was useful in some way, but then I felt that it just lumped everyone into the same category, that everyone should eat the same things and here are your food groups and off you go. So I just sort of paused on that. And then it was really through my own health issue that I got here. So I was looking around, I was working in a sort of related field that I was a producer for a website in the health area. So exposed to a lot of things. But at the time I'd been running and training for a marathon. So I'd been running for about 2 hours at a time, easily, no problem. And then someone quite close to me died suddenly, and I went out for a run 2 days later and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't run down the end of the block without having this asthma that was just debilitating. And so I went to my family doctor, and God bless her, she gave me what she knew, but she said, you have asthma, you'll have asthma, you're probably going to have it for the rest of your life, and here's an inhaler and off you go. And I kind of paused, and first of all, I'm like, I was just running for 2 hours. Now I can't even go down the street that fast. There's got to be another reason. And so I'd mentioned this death, but she said, yeah, probably not related. And so I just paused, and it was through someone, a friend of mine said, well, why don't you go and see this Chinese medicine doctor? And so I went, and it was one of those experiences. As soon as I went in, I was telling her what was going on, and she sort of nodded like, of course you're going to have lung stuff after that. And I'd had this chronic knot on my back, and she said, yeah, that's the lung spot, and that's the acupuncture point for the lung. And in Chinese medicine, the lung system has to do so in Chinese medicine, every system has an emotion, a time of year, a food, a color, and the emotion associated with the lung system is grief or sadness. And so it's not uncommon that when something happens that is incredibly sad or a shock like that the lung system can be affected. And so it's just, I had this whole body experience of like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. And in working with this woman who later became my mentor, I did acupuncture, I did herbs, the asthma went away, it's never come back. And I was able to process my feelings and the grief around what happened. So I kind of knew from that moment on, that's what I wanted to study. So I went on to study and I never looked back.
Wow, that's a beautiful story, and how powerful that you were able to kind of move in the direction of something that was so life-changing for you in terms of your own kind of self-understanding and something that you were going through. So I would love to talk a little bit about the what are the fundamental features that distinguish Chinese medicine from Western medicine? I know you've talked a little bit about each system having a kind of emotion or a related related to some kind of psychological affliction or issue, and I want to talk a little bit about the psychology of the organs in a bit, but just in a kind of general sense, what are the fundamental features that distinguish Chinese medicine from Western medicine?
It's a great question. It's a big question, but so Chinese medicine in its essence is about balance. So the idea that when we're in balance, we feel well, we have lots of energy, we sleep well, our digestive system is strong. When we're out of balance, our body's going to be talking to us. So in Chinese medicine, every single symptom, little or big, is telling you about what's going on internally. So everything's relevant. And it's this idea of the body as an ecosystem. So again, and everything's telling us, giving us an idea of what's going on, but also everything affects and is affected by everything else. So if we have something emotional going on, it could very well affect, I mean, most people probably know this through experience. It can affect our digestive system. It can affect our sleep. When we're looking for what's going on, we're always looking for the root cause. So the idea that we call it root and branch, kind of like, tree systems. If something's going on with the leaves, you want to treat the root systems to help heal it. So we are looking for the root. And once we find that and treat from there, that all those branch symptoms, all those other little symptoms will often get better as well. So it's not about focusing on that, oh, I have a rash, let's do the rash, but I also have, a stomach upset, let's for that. But if we realize, oh, it's actually the stomach is the root of it, if we treat the stomach system, then the rash doesn't have to express. It's feeling sort of that healing. And so this idea of balance and that everything is related. Chinese medicine is kind of interesting because it really evolved. It's been 5,000 years. And it evolved by observing people in the clinic and observing people in nature. So they often reference nature in a way to explain things. I think it was often because to explain it there were a lot of farmers and things like that were using it. So if we explained, hot, cold, dry, damp, I joke that it always sounds like a weather report when we're talking about the body, but it will give us an indication of sort of what's going on. And so it evolved from observing people in the clinic and noticing that, oh, okay, everyone who has digestive disturbances like this also has a sore point here, also has this emotional thing going on. And also it's really grouped into these categories, and it's under everything is sort of put into, we call them organ systems, but it's also sort of the seasons are part of it. So sort of just to give an example, like the lung system in Chinese medicine also relates to the immune system. It shows up in the skin. It shows up in our breath. Grief or sadness is an emotion that when it's, we say all emotions are important, but we want healthy expression of it. So grief and sadness is relevant and important sometimes, but it's overexpression or underexpression where there's an imbalance. It shows up more in the fall. So a lot of times people who have a lung system imbalance might get more lung systems, either more frequent colds and flus or asthma or things like that show up in the fall. The digestive system, we call it the spleen and stomach. It tends to show up in the mental pattern of overthinking or worry or overpensiveness, show up in looser bowels, shows up in the muscles and sort of holding things in place. So sometimes when someone has this imbalance, it will show up in like a prolapse of organ or bruising easily, or when this digestive system's weak, it's going to show up as an overproduction of mucus. So someone who's, stuffy all the time or can't get sort of bloated after they eat, that sign. So each system will have this. It shows up in a sense organ, a time of day. So if someone wakes up, say at 3 a.m. all the time, that was a sign that system's off of balance. It shows up in a body part, so eyes, ears, tendons, that kind of stuff as well. So it's very complex. It sounds very simple because we can say someone's got too much heat in their body. So everyone can understand that. But it goes quite deep as well. And so this whole idea of the system wanting we need to balance things out. It's quite simple. As if someone's too hot, then we want to cool them down. Yeah. And if someone's too cold, we want to warm them up. If someone's got too much mucus, we want to dry them out. If someone's too dry, we want to moisten them. So it's very simple, so people get it, but then it's the complexity. It gets quite deep. But that's why it's so, there's not one way or one answer for people. So 5 people can come to me with breast cancer, or 5 people can come to me with asthma, and their pattern's different. So we're going to treat them according to the pattern. Yeah. So that idea that no 2 people are the same is really fundamental in it. So I think that's one of the big differences from Chinese medicine to Western medicine, and that we're changing all the time. So our bodies are changing. So if I start to treat someone, they're not going to be on the same medication or the same herbal blend, because their body's going to adapt and change as well. And so I'm going to always change what I'm doing according to where they're at. So it's a very complex system. And I think that the idea of where it sort of differs from a lot of the I guess the media that we get around health, it's like everyone should have a green smoothie, or everyone should, do it. And there's nothing wrong with a green smoothie, but for some people, cold, or drinks in the morning when a lot of people have them is the worst thing possible for them. And so some people are going to feel amazing, but then someone else doesn't feel great, and they think, what's wrong with me? Like, because the food's good, so it must be, what's going on. It can't be the food. And then sometimes that could be a person who's cold, and if that person's having cold first thing in the morning, or frozen drinks or things like that, it's just adding more cold into their system, so it's just going to make them feel worse. But if that same person had something warm with, say, ginger, food, we look at food as having properties as well as nutritional value, and they have that, and they stay away from their cold, they're actually going to feel better. They're going to absorb their food better. They're going to feel more vitality. They're not going to feel as sluggish or heavy. And so that's really where the magic comes in, is when we recognize we're all individuals, our balance, mental, emotional, what we eat, how we live, genetics, everything, the environment we live in. If we live in a damp basement, or we live in dry, hot Arizona, that's going to have an impact on our health as well. So when we're looking at, when someone comes into my office, or when, in Chinese medicine, we look at every little bit of the person and looking for those signs of what's out of balance, and then treating from there.
I mean, it seems so, it seems like it makes so much intuitive sense why this would be a better kind of formula or framework to kind of approach someone's health. But, and so essentially what you're saying is that the kind of, and I'll just say traditional Western medicine, because I know that we both know that there are like different ways in which these are starting to complement. Yep. Or Eastern medicine is starting to be incorporated into Western healthcare. And so all these things are changing. But is essentially what you're saying, that the approach of the West is really a kind of one size fits all, that, you see this person has this symptoms, they're diagnosed with this disease, and rather than looking to a variety of factors, as you're saying the Chinese medicine practitioner would do, it's really, well, this is what the establishment prescribes based on this ailment, therefore you take this pill, or we do this. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, this sort of idea of, we sometimes say it's like a mechanic looks at a car. Oh, your carburetor's down. We're going to take that out and fix that, as opposed to, well, what else is feeding into, why is that system broken? Like, so that's where that ecosystem, if you've got a bug infestation in your garden, well, what are you going to add in? You're not just going to take, that sort of got bad past my analogy, but you know what I mean? That's that idea that we don't want to just band-aid things. We just don't want to make, if you have a rash, we don't want to just make that rash go away. We want to understand why the rash is there, seek to balance and heal that part, and then the rash won't come back. But the idea is, if we just put a cream on, the rash is gone. If we take that cream off, is the rash going to come back? Yeah. So it's important. That it's true healing, and the idea that, that idea of balance, not just a precarious balance, but it's more like this idea of a harmonious balance, so that each system is feeding. We have this idea of like a mother and a son sort of thing, or a child and parent, where the parent organ is going to feed and nourish the child. And if that parent is depleted, it won't nourish that one. So you're going to get the second one. So it's going to have effect, like going to see side effects or see different symptoms coming up there. So the idea that every system needs to be nourished and balanced. And that's where we're going to get this harmonious balance. And when it's off, then we need to treat the whole system to get it back to
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah. What you're saying about the kind of mechanic idea, it reminds me of my brother was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when he was in college. And it was a terrifying experience, because he didn't know what was happening and he was losing a lot of blood and his blood count got very low, and it was sort of life threatening at that point. And I remember, for the first, and it's been many, many years now that he's had it, but it seemed like it was like years before, he was being told by anyone to like look at diet, not to say that diet would necessarily like heal everything, but the fact that it wasn't even like offered as like, maybe we should look at an elimination diet and see what things are causing inflammation, blah blah blah. And I just found it so mind-boggling that that wouldn't be, and almost irresponsible of a doctor not to bring that up. It was like, okay, you're here, you're bleeding, you're hemorrhaging in your intestines, let's fix that, and then bye, see you later. But with no tools to use to address the possibility of more inflammation. It was, so.
Yeah. I think it's hard too, though, but I think there's two things. Like one, we shouldn't pit the systems against each other because they're very different. And so what Western medicine can do that Chinese medicine can't do, but they're not supposed to be one or the other. But also saying like Western medical practitioners, they're not trained in nutrition.
Right.
So how are they going to offer something that they don't know? But I think where the disconnect or the lack is happening is that they're not saying, I don't know about this, go see someone who does, and recognizing, because it's really, when systems can work together, it's synergistic. It's like I've worked in integrated centers, and when we pull from each other's strengths, that's when people do really, really well, and that we can work together and then say, okay, so nutrition's important. I don't know about it, but this person does, but I do know about this. And then also I think where we the disconnect comes is when we've handed over our health to a practitioner saying, you tell me what's wrong and you fix me. Where my experience for myself and my own healing, but also with the people who come through my door to work with me, is nobody knows your body as well as you do. And so you're going to know, and I know, especially people, like I've worked a lot in cancer and fertility, there's a lot of wisdom and people know exactly what's been off balance. They're like, oh no, I know something that needs to change. I haven't been doing it. I can't give them that answer, but I can support them with all the tools. And then it's about trusting the wisdom of our body. And so for a number of years, we've lost that. And we thought, no, it's all in your head, or nothing's coming up on a test, so there's nothing wrong. And so people get discouraged and they feel like, oh my God, I'm feeling this way, but there's nothing wrong with me. What's going on? And that's where the wisdom of Chinese medicine, it's great prevention medicine, because it's like, catch things. I always say your body's talking all the time. Catch it when it's talking, not when it's screaming. And disease is screaming. And so if we can catch it with all these different signs and symptoms before, and recognizing, oh, I have, whatever, a smoothie in the morning, I feel terrible. What's that connection? Or I have a smoothie and I feel great. That's great. But dairy doesn't do so well for me, or whatever the thing is, and trusting that. And then having, I think, as a practitioner, it's our responsibility to listen and to say, you know yourself, I'm going to give you what tools I have, but then trusting that, and empowering the person to say, you're right, there's a reason for that, as opposed to having people not trust their inner knowing. I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit, I want to invite into the conversation these notions that we have that come from, I guess, the philosophy of Taoism, but are central to Chinese medicine as well, which are the notions of qi and also yin and yang. So would you talk about these concepts and how they function in Chinese medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. The yin and yang is sort of the foundation. So everything in the world is yin or yang, kind of, and it's all in relation to each other. So they are two sort of opposites. One being, so their characteristics of yin would be it's more of a colder energy. It's more of a passive or a sort of still or restful energy. It tends to show up more in the feminine. It's dark. It shows up at nighttime. Where at yang, by the opposite, is more of a masculine energy, more heat. Qi is part of that energy. It's more of an active daytime energy. So everything falls in. So it's all about the idea of balance. So it's like we need, what is night without day? What is day without night? What is hot without cold? If we just had cold, we wouldn't have anything, nothing to contrast it. And so we can have things that are, ice would be the ultimate yin, and then steam or heat would be the opposite, but then you can have all kinds of things in between. The idea too, I see in our modern culture, there's real imbalance between the two. A lot of the characteristics that we tend to support or applaud right now are very yang based. So it's this idea of active, going, achieving, moving, doing, busy, like people are busy all the time. Yeah. And it's all this sort of stimulants, got to keep up, got to keep the energy up. We're missing a lot of that yin. And so the yin would be more that parasympathetic nervous system, the rest, the relaxation, the downtime. The yin is also that idea of the deep, the unknown. And you can apply this to anything. You can apply it to just your daily activity. Like, okay, in the morning you get up, I have energy, I'm moving, I'm active. That's more of a yang time. At nighttime, we need to rest. And that's the ultimate yin in order to have the energy to get through the day. And anyone who has gone through a period of insomnia knows that when you don't get rest at night, you feel pretty crappy and it feels awful. And so what unfortunately I see that we're doing in our culture is we're going, but not getting that rest. And what happens is we burn out. Yin can also, that idea of going in can also apply to creative cycles too. So it's like that idea of going in and sort of being still and letting an idea come up, and then we move into manifesting it. So that sort of, and everything falls into these categories. So Qi is, you mentioned that. So Qi is considered, it's poorly translated as energy. It's actually called really wise or smart energy or vital energy or vitality. So anything that involves some kind of movement or something transforming, anything that requires energy of any sort involves qi. So it could be, our cells dividing, from us talking to walking to our digestive system. That all involves qi, and qi's responsible for sort of holding things in place in the body. It's also for just that energy. So when qi's depleted, people might get obviously fatigue, depending what system it affects. And I think, in talking about Chinese medicine, the foundation sort of teaching it, we'd go into sort of into more depth about the different organ systems and how it affects. But if a qi is deficient in, say, the stomach system, spleen, stomach system, that person would show up with prolapses, maybe like hemorrhoids or prolapses, or bruising easily because the body's not keeping the blood in its place. It can show up in looser bowels. It can show up also qi in our ability to breathe in air. So it can show up as sort of asthma or ability to get in that way. And opposite to qi would be blood. So blood is under yin. So blood is not, it's the blood we think of coursing through our veins, but we say it's a very nutrient dense substance that goes through our body. So those two are paired, just like yin and yang. We need qi and we need blood, because if we just have qi, it's moving stuff. Hasn't got anything to move if the blood's not there, and blood's there, but it needs the qi to course it and move it through the body. So those are sort of fundamental pieces of Chinese medicine, and how and qi is like that.
Is qi that like the kind of the governing intelligence that causes your heart to beat?
Yeah, so anything that requires movement, like our heart to beat, our mind to think, our lungs to take in air, our will to live, to get through. So if we're qi deficient, sometimes we just don't have that energy. But yeah, so it's just basically this incredibly smart, wise energy and it fuses. It's not just in an individual; it's in the world. So like qi in plants, right? Anything that's alive has qi in it. And I always joke when I'm teaching nutrition class, like you can tell when you go to the grocery store, foods that have great qi. So it's life force, right? So if you get some kale or something and it's bright and like happy and looking really firm and kind of like, oh, I'd like to eat that. That's full of qi. And it's often foods that has been like when we pick them and they're fresh, they've got a lot of qi or life force in them. And then you put that piece of kale in your fridge for a week and you take it out later and it's like limp and kind of hanging there. That's not got a lot of life force left in it. So we can see it in just like plants as they die or things. So, and you can see sort of, animals or people at the end of their life, we only have a certain amount of qi and qi gets replenished through our food and through the air that we breathe. And so that's what we say, that we make it all the time as we're living. But we also have sort of we're born with, if you say like our bank account of energy or sort of our genetics. So as much energy as our parents had for us, they're going to pass on to us. And so that's like stored energy. And so ideally we're making enough to get this chi or energy through our days, through eating well and through breathing and taking in proper oxygen. If we don't have enough, we're going to take from that bank account, and then that's going to transform that energy into usable energy or qi. The thing with our bank account of energy is we call it jing in Chinese medicine. But if we keep dipping into that, all of a sudden we get into overdraft. And so that's where burnout happens. And that's where people we say that the kidney system in Chinese medicine is that sort of bank of energy. And people who are sort of using too much of that will get things like low back pain, knee pain, waking in the night to go to the bathroom, insomnia, that kind of stuff will show up, that system, premature graying of the hair, weak bones, weak teeth, that kind of stuff. And so that's a sign that we're going into our overdraft. And so it's this idea of balance. Like we just don't want more qi. We need blood to build it. We need to make sure we're producing it from our food and stuff, but we also make sure that we're not overexpending it. So that's why rest and that sort of idea of yin is so important too, that we need to, I say to people, you can't breathe out all the time. You have to breathe in. And so that's kind of the idea of taking qi in and then restoring and resting. And then we're able to go out to the world and do what we need to do.
Beautiful. So, now moving on to kind of, so we have this idea. Well, actually, a clarifying question. So you had said qi, it's not totally right to translate it as energy, and I sort of understood your distinction to be that it's a wise energy. So is the difference that that the energy is intelligent and not just mindless? Is that the idea?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk. We have been talking a little bit about the psychology of organs and the relationship between certain mood dispositions or psychological afflictions with particular organs, and I love, one of the things I love about the chakra system is the way in which it maps psychology onto the body, which is in line with what we're talking about, where this dualism between the mind and body, which is sort of the way, at least how I see traditional Western medicine functioning, with the separation of psychiatry from the physical sciences and stuff like that. Whereas this is really saying, no, these two are integrated. We can't speak of the mind separate from the body. Yeah. And so I'd love to just kind of explore, and I know it's not a one size fits all. We were talking before the interview about how grief isn't always the lungs, but so what's the kind of general association of different organs with a variety of what we might call kind of psychological ailments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we say 5 organ systems, and each one has a sense organ, as I said, like a time of day and emotion and that. So I'll go through them and sort of explain how it might show. And knowing that one organ out of balance, that idea that nothing stands alone, so it can also affect another organ.
So each organ has a time of day as well? Yeah.
So
what does that mean exactly?
So it means that there's a clock that whatever that an organ system. It's like a time, each organ system has a time of year as well. So like the lung system is in the fall, the winter is the kidney system, the spring is the liver, the summer is heart, and then the spleen, stomach system, either it's an earth element. So we say either late fall, or that's kind of like earth, in the sense of everything happens on the earth. So it's like our center. So, so as well, a time of day. So the idea that the heart system, it shows up midday more than, because it's kind of that fire system. It shows up summer. It's like the heat of the heart system is fire. It's like the most yang organ. And so it shows up in a really active time of the day. So when someone has an imbalance in the system, sometimes what they might have is like around 11 a.m., they're getting heart palpitations. They're noticing they're a little more anxious at that time, because the heart system has to do with anxiety when it's off of balance, or joy when it's in balance. And so at nighttime, the liver system, so the systems are paired. So liver and gallbladder are together. So between 11 and 3 a.m. is a liver gallbladder system. So if someone's always waking up at 2 a.m., there could be an imbalance in that system. And people might have noticed if they're really stressed, because the liver system has to do with stress shows up in the system more than any other one. They might wake up at 2:30 in the morning, kind of stressed or thinking about stuff. But when they're not stressed, they seem to sleep through. So that, and we notice like kidney system shows up in the afternoon, like 5 to 7 kind of time. So those people who get that 4 p.m. slump and they feel really exhausted, that can be that the kidney systems. And so sometimes it's as simple as listening to your body. And if you're tired between 2 and 4, and you have the ability to take a rest, or to do some 10 minutes of meditation or take a walk. Most people go for sugar and coffee, which tends to stimulate the adrenals, and then you're getting into a bit of a slippery slope. But so
does that sort of sorry, because I drink a lot of coffee.
Yes, yeah.
So does that sort of, and actually I do feel like I have that 2 to 4 slump a lot of days. Yeah. So is that are you saying that that's exacerbating the issue if you answer that call with a cup of coffee?
What caffeine does is it stimulates our adrenal glands to pump out more cortisol or adrenaline. And so that gives us that rush. So it's not the coffee giving us the energy. It's actually our body's reserves going, okay, here you go, have some more. And so then it's like going into that overdraft a bit. So if we can just, take a rest, meditate, like I said, go for a walk, or have some sort of nourishing snack or something, and just take a little bit of a break. And that tends to recharge people, and it's not dipping into that reserved energy so much. Okay. Yeah. And again, it's the person too. So, I mean, it's kind of normal, but I think we tend to push through so much. So we have these unrealistic expectations of how much we're supposed to accomplish in a day. I think everyone has it like the best they've ever felt in their life. That's their bar. And then if they're not measuring up to that, there's something wrong. Whereas opposed to there's this natural like energy. We're supposed to rest at certain times, certainly like in the winter. Think of what nature does. Everything hibernates, it goes in, and that we're supposed to expend less energy in the winter so that we can build up our energy, so that come spring, when there's all that movement, that natural vitality comes back, we're able to go and do stuff. So when we push through it with the same sort of to-do list year round, we actually are causing ourselves a bit of harm, as opposed to listening to what do I need? Okay, so maybe I need to do a little less for a month or two, and trust that it will come back. I think people are so fearful. If I'm tired, I'm going to be tired for the rest of my life. But if we just listen and drop in, that the body responds really, really well. And I found people who have that 2 to 4 slump, and they stop drinking coffee, but they can just, take a moment, they actually start to not have that as much. They tend to rebound a little bit more. But yeah, sorry, I digress from your original question around the emotions. That so again, you're getting this probably getting the idea of the complexity of it and how everything is sort of related. So I'll go through the systems and explain a little bit about the emotional side of it. So if we start with the kidney system, it shows up in the winter. It shows up in the bones, and it shows up in that sort of 2 to 7 in the afternoon. The emotion associated with kidneys is fear. So, and also courage. So we're supposed to feel scared sometimes, because if we didn't, we'd be in trouble. But when we're feeling too scared, or we don't have the courage to move forward with things, or it stops us, that's an imbalance. So someone I've seen I remember a woman, she was she was, I think, 42 when she had her first baby. And we say having babies actually takes a big chunk of that kidney energy, so that bank account of energy. And she was a very vibrant, very, successful businesswoman, kind of fearless in the sense that she would just like have a goal and go for it. And after having her daughter, she couldn't leave the house. She was so scared to walk down the street, and she couldn't figure out what it was. But for us, it was that kidney system being off of balance. So when we replenished that, then she was able to move forward. But it's just so how it can show. It can show up when the body's drained and the emotions can come up, or it can be someone who's had a traumatic event and it's caused them to have a lot of fear, and it takes healing the emotional event in order for them to sort of have that balance with fear again.
Wow.
And then the liver system, it shows up in the tendons, it shows up in the eyes, it shows up in the nails. So someone with like ridged nails or hangnails or dry eyes, that can be that system off of balance. The liver system's in charge of circulating chi. So it's kind of like, we call it the general of the systems, and it kind of gets stuff done, and it's in charge of movement. Its emotion is anger or frustration can be part of that system. Also, forgiveness can be part of it. So again, every emotion is important. So anger, healthy expression of anger is important, because sometimes we do need to be angry, and that also motivates change sometimes. Yeah. But when we have overexpression or underexpression, which I see quite a bit in our modern culture, that's when it's out of balance. So someone who's really quick to anger, really snappy, that and can show up in PMS and with women, or sort of menstrual disharmony and problems that can show up with that system out of balance. But also the underexpression, no, I'm fine. Everything's fine. When really they should be angry, because there is a reason, right? And so I think that we've demonized some of the emotions. We think, if I'm not happy, like that's what I'm always striving for. But joy is great, but that's only one part of being a whole complex person. Right. So it's honoring of that. So that's the liver system. Tends to show up more in the springtime. It shows up in the flank pains and stuff like that. So, and that will show up in the waking at sort of that 2 to 3 a.m. Sometimes hard to get a big breath in because your ribs feel tight. That kind of stuff will be that system off of balance.
So if that strikes around 2 or 3 a.m., would a symptom of that be like waking up at that time maybe?
Yep, exactly. Waking up in that time. Waking up with, if that's, with stressful sort of thoughts and things like that, that can be that sign out of balance. Yep. And also, this idea that, again, that one system off of balance will affect another one. So I would say like the liver and the digestive system, the spleen stomach system, the liver can kind of, the term what they use is attack, but can really affect that system. So I say it's like two friends that really shouldn't hang out together, because they kind of bring out the worst in each other. So if the liver system is overacting on that stomach system, you're going to get things like IBS. So this is the person who, because the digestive system, the spleen, stomach shows up in our ability to take food in and to absorb it and to create blood, basically, and nourishment for our body. So it's going to show up in the muscles. It shows up in our bowels. It can show up in our ability, like our taste will show up in the system. Worry and pensiveness is this system. So someone who it overthinks, either like fretting about something, or just someone who overthinks because of their job. So students get an imbalance with this system all the time as well, just overthinking. And so if this system's off balance, they're going to get bloating after they eat. The byproduct of a weak stomach is often mucus. So some people will get stuffy after they eat, or more mucus production. They'll get looser bowels, bruising easily. All that is that system off balance. So if it's strictly that system, they're probably going to have loose stools and feel a weak digestive system all the time. But if it's the liver influencing it, someone's going to get that IBS. So constipated because things aren't moving because they're stuck. And then all of a sudden they're going to get loose bowels or something like that. Or, so it's just kind of that where they can affect each other.
Do the intestines play into the stomach liver connection?
Yeah, so the liver and gallbladder are
Oh, I'm
paired.
sorry, stomach.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so liver, gallbladder, stomach, spleen.
Hmm.
So we say, or pancreas is kind of the organs. Then there's the lung system and the large intestine
Oh, I see.
are,
Okay, we're
yeah,
getting
are
there.
paired. Yeah, we're
I'm
getting
rushing
there.
here.
Yeah. So the lung and large intestine. So the lung system shows up in our immune system.
Mm.
It shows up in the skin. So it's a lot about boundaries, our lung system. So it's about breathe, and so obviously breathing in and also letting out what doesn't work. So the large intestine is like getting rid of what we no longer need. Breathing in life, also with our skin, it's going to keep out pathogens, things like that protect us and from the external world. And it also shows up, we say Wei Qi, but it's our immune system, our ability to fight off colds or flus. And so someone who has the system's weak is someone who's going to get colds and flus really easily. They might have spontaneous sweating, like they can't, like their pores are kind of too loose, if you will. So they're going to sweat easily, like too much. Breathlessness, having a hard time getting sort of that breath in, sometimes can be part of the system. And so the emotion associated with this system is grief or sadness. So again, that's healthy and normal. So for me, with my ailment, like with the asthma, was a grief, like that shocking death of someone. It's both, and again, this idea of paired, like the lungs breathe in the air, and we say the kidney system is about grasping and pulling down that energy or that oxygen. So a shock will often hit the kidney system. It will show up with like premature graying of the hair and stuff like that. Sometimes if anyone's had a trauma or something like that, they'll get a patch of gray hair that comes all of a sudden. But so having someone who died suddenly and it be a shock, it sort of affected that whole lung and kidney system for me. But so grief and sadness is part of that system. So someone who, maybe if that's off of balance, someone who's abnormally sad or crying all the time, that they can't. I don't remember one patient, she cried for a year after a breakup, and she just got incredibly depleted in the system. And so it was that there's just a bit of an imbalance. It's just maybe too much. And also people who don't grieve might have issues that show up in that system as well. And then the last one, that is the heart system. So that shows up obviously in the function of our heart, if any, and it also shows up, we say, the heart mind connection. Yeah. So our spirit is part of this system. And imbalances with this would show up with like palpitations sometimes, also dream disturbed sleep or trouble falling asleep, or that really, really, really busy mind at night. And so joy is part of this system being imbalanced, but anxiety is a sign of this system being anxiety or depression are often this sign of these two. So if it's depleted, it can be depression. If it's over, like it's got too much heat, we'd say, in it, that you can show up with anxiety as well. That's sort of generally, but again, the idea that everything is connected and what's the root is what we're always looking for.
Interesting. So with the anxiety and depression, one being related to the heart mind, as you're saying, given that this is, these are two of the most, what's the word, pervasive, I guess, issues, that people suffer from. What it would be a Chinese medicine kind of response in order to treat these? Obviously in Western psychiatry, we have the pill. A whole host of lovely pills that you can take, and then you're just addicted to drugs for the rest of your life. So what is the response from a Chinese medicine perspective to this issue?
Yeah, that's a great question and a huge question in some ways, and it's a hard one. I think with Chinese medicine, when we try to answer for one reason, it gets really frustrating for people and hard because there's, again, the complexities that go into it. So I'd have to look at what's going on. So sometimes it can be sort of, again, back to this idea of things being connected, the different systems. The heart, we need a certain amount of blood to function in the heart. And if someone's not eating well, or if their digestive system is weak, they're not actually producing the blood. So that's not going to nourish the heart. So that can actually cause depression. So we could say heart blood deficiency is something that could show up in someone. So, and that's a pattern. But then we look at food. We have to obviously look at the mental emotional state. So are there, traumas, what's been going on from that? Because we have to look at everything. So when I'm approaching working with someone with anxiety or depression, look at their history. So what's been going on? Where does the anxiety come from? What's their lifestyle? So sometimes anxiety can come from someone who's not listening to their body and pushing through and overstimulated and overworked, and they're not actually resting. So then it's sort of like it goes into hyperactive mode, and so the people are like their adrenals are over firing. Yeah. So they've got all this adrenaline in their system, and so they're burning out, but they've got the anxiety. So sometimes it's like we have to look at lifestyle. We have to look at the food. I do a lot of mindfulness and stuff as well, and the breath work and things, because sometimes we're in that fight or flight state constantly. I actually find the majority of people are in fight or flight state going through our world, whether you look at the traffic that we have to navigate, the work hours, the amount of stimulation and the amount of information coming in, the amount of stimulants in our food. So the coffee, the caffeine, the sugars, the processed foods, all that is stimulating. So again, back to the idea, like that all yang based stuff, we need that yin. So, I mean, that sounds very simplistic, but it can be quite complex, because what happens in true healing is we have to look at the whole person, and then we have to make changes. So I think that what we want so often is the pill, the thing, make it go better, like make it better, but make it really better, like the root, but the root only gets better. Like all the things that we do every day impact our health. And so in order to heal, we have to look at all those things and make changes. And sometimes they're big changes. And in my work with cancer is sometimes like the body's screaming. So it's like, okay, we don't have the option of saying, yeah, you can do this gently. But sometimes it doesn't have to be big. And it's about recognizing and making subtle changes. Sometimes if we're taking something out, what can we put in that's nourishing, that will also feel good for the person? Because sometimes we think of this, it's going to be a really hard and difficult thing, but sometimes it can feel really good, and it can be very subtle, but over the long term, and that's really where huge change happens. It's over the long term. It's not quick fixes, that the person can feel way better and more restorative. But a lot of it takes that deeper listening of what is actually going on in the lifestyle and the body. And I think we've got the individual, but we've got our culture, which is not serving us so well as far as that goes, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's, you mentioned cancer. So let's move into talking about that, which is, one of your main areas of your work is integrative cancer care. And so I guess my question is, what is integrative cancer care, and how does it differ from the status quo approach to cancer care?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had the privilege of working at a place called Inspire Health in British Columbia for a number of years, and it's a government-funded center that is integrative cancer care, and it's funded by the different cancer agencies. So it was great. So it's working MDs with NDs and Chinese medicine, counselors and massage therapists all under one roof. And so there's a couple of approaches to integrative cancer care. So there's integrative in different modalities. So working together with conventional treatments that are going on with Chinese medicine or nutrition all together. But then the bigger thing is more integrating the whole person, because cancer is multifactorial. It's not one thing. And yet our conventional way of treating it is really, it's like, oh, you have a tumor. So we're treating that, it all becomes about a tumor. If that someone's got a solid mass tumor as their cancer. And so the traditional approaches are, okay, we've got radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery, and there you go. And so that leaves out the person, which is, cancer, it doesn't come overnight. And so it's like, in order to treat it and to heal it, we need to look at the whole person and look at what's been going on and what's going on in that person's life. So integrative cancer care and what Inspire Health is doing, and there's some great books out there. Radical Remission by Kelly Turner looks at this, as well as there's another book called Remarkable Recoveries. And these two people looked at people with incurable cancers, and they were were not expected to live a long time, that they recovered fully and are cancer free 10, 20, 30 years later. And so looking at what did they do to get there. And so what they found are these characteristics, these 9 characteristics or 12 characteristics that everyone did. And so what's interesting for me as a Chinese medicine practitioner is it's this whole person based healing. And that's what they're studying at Inspire Health. And they have they're doing studies throughout, and they found that people who approach cancer with this integrated whole person based approach fare way better remission rates. Like they have like survival rates are better than just doing conventional treatments. So it's this idea of approaching the whole person. So the idea that no one else knows, like everyone knows their body best, and that we have to look at things like diet, lifestyle, genetics for sure, but then we look at spiritual beliefs, connections, emotional relationships. All of that is fundamental in healing and about recovery from cancer. And I mean, the nice thing is I apply this to everyone who comes in because that's really the essence of Chinese medicine. But that, and some people to greater or lesser degrees, like some people, diet is their huge thing, but they have a really strong spiritual connection. Or some people, it's like their emotions, they just haven't gone there. It's been too hard for them. So it's really the emotional work, but their diet is pristine, So it's really, to greater or less degrees for each individual. And that's, again, why we can't say this is the cookie cutter version of when we're dealing with breast cancer, this is the protocol. It's because 5 women with breast cancer are going to have very different patterns as far as Chinese medicine goes, and also very different lifestyles as to what's going on in their life that has got them to this place. So it's really that idea of this bringing the whole person into the healing plan. Mm.
So, for people out there who are maybe not familiar with this or who think of cancer in the kind of like, okay, I find I have cancer, I go get chemo. Mm-hmm. Can you describe sort of what you've, some instances or of what you've seen change or shift as a result of this care?
Yeah. So the nice thing is that that idea of synergistic medicine, like where if people are going through chemo, there's a lot that I can do to help someone with the side effects. So the idea that when we do that, like if I can help keep blood levels high, help the nausea stay down, to help people maintain a quality of life, so that treatments stay, if that's what they're choosing to do, that they're staying on time, that it's sort of maximizing the effects. But it's when we bring the whole person in, a lot of people, when they've been diagnosed with cancer, I mean, it's a huge shock, wake up call, and very scary for a lot of people. And so I think it can be very empowering medicine with this whole person based approach, because a lot of times, and the beautiful thing in the research is that the things that have the biggest impact are the things that people can do on their own at home. And it's not relying on a Western medical practitioner or a Chinese medicine or practitioner or a naturopath. Those are important, but there's a pyramid that the sort of Inspire Health has around the most, healthcare and what's important. And the foundation, the bottom of the pyramid is will to live. And then it's like joy and, emotional connections and things. And as we go up, it's like conventional treatments in Chinese medicine. They're at the very top. So we can do lots to help people with the, physical sort of effects. But really the things that make the biggest difference are those things that people can do at home. So when working with people, like I've had, I must say, the most inspirational people come through my door, and I have so much respect for them. And a lot of them have just done amazing things in listening to their body and listening to what they need to do. So I remember one gentleman, as you can imagine, people get very focused on the treatments and what's going on and the cancer and the results and all that. And when we started talking, I was sort of trying to find out more about him and what he liked to do. And one of the things he loved to do was playing music, but he hadn't been playing for ages because he'd been so focused on this. And so, we worked together, and sort of some of his homework was to play music. And so he'd start saying, oh, I played for my girls. Like he had two daughters. And then was part of his weekly routine. And he felt so much better after playing. And I remember him coming in one day and just saying, he played with a bunch of his friends in a band. And he said, for 3 hours, I forgot that I had cancer. Wow. And what happens in our body when we are in that fight or flight state, we don't tend to heal. But when we're in that open, expansive, that sort of more relaxed state, that's when our body and our cells heal. I've had people who listened, people who have gone through all types of treatment with, choosing radiation or choosing chemotherapy, and other people that knew that. I remember one woman in particular, she was a young girl, and she had a very, she'd had a cancer, a blood-bone cancer, had gone through radiation in the past, gone into remission. She'd gone away, met someone, long sort of story, came back, got married, came back to her family, and was living near them, had a very toxic relationship with her family. And while she was living there, her cancer came back. And so they were going to start doing radiation again. And her husband, they were talking, and he said, what do you want to do? And she's like, what, I just need to go away. I just need to get out of here. And so she did. They decided to go. He was from New Zealand, so they went back to New Zealand and spent a lot of time on the beach and just had a relaxing time. And while she was there, her cancer went into remission again without doing any of the conventional treatments. But she knew that her relationship with her family was incredibly toxic, and she needed to get away. And so it was taking care of herself on that level. And that's sort of an extreme case in some ways, but I've lots of people who sort of have spent time listening to that inner voice. Some people like just knowing immediately that they needed to change their diet, and it had a huge impact on their health, but they wouldn't have done it otherwise. Yeah. So there's just so many, it's going to look different for everyone, but it's the people that not only, and I think one of the things too is there are people that I've worked with. One of my colleagues used to call it cancer thrivers, as opposed to cancer survivors, because people might be still living with cancer, but they've never felt better in their life. Wow. So they might be still going through some conventional treatments or doing different things, but they've changed their diet, they've worked on their emotional relationships, they're honoring themselves and their energy needs in the course of a day. They're really listening to that, and through that, their health, they feel better than they've ever felt. So I think it's also breaking down of what it means, like what does cancer mean, and that you can be a whole person and still be living with cancer and working towards healing, but that feeling great in the process.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, that story you shared about the woman was really inspiring, and I think the common theme that one of the common themes I'm feeling here is this approach to empowering the patient. Even when. Because it is sort of like, it's the go-to that if you, I imagine myself having cancer, and of course then it's like I'm a victim, and there's all this whole psychological and emotional hang-ups that go along with this. And so it's hard to kind of imagine that you could feel like a whole person in that state, but of course, in any condition that you're in, that is available. And so to empower people to access that is incredible. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that's where real true healing comes from, when we recognize, that healer that's within, and to tap into that and just have, like, I look at myself as sort of a coach, that I'm here to help people, but part of it is helping for them to figure out what it is inside that they know, and it's just bringing that out into the light. Beautiful.
So now let's talk a little bit about fertility, because that's the other area that you work a lot in. So I would love to hear a little bit about the approach to fertility from the perspective of traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah. It's ironically, cancer and fertility have a lot of overlaps, believe it or not. I think they both are things that have a huge impact on someone's whole life, and that it can be all encompassing. Like, they get so focused on it that a lot of that the individual gets lost in the fertility, because fertility, often people are going to fertility clinics quite quickly. And once they get in there, there's sort of a cycle that goes in, that they're in the clinic a lot. So blood tests, ultrasounds, constantly monitoring their body. And there's no real break for women, because if they're going through the treatments, it's their whole month is either working towards trying to get pregnant, ovulation, and then waiting. And then it's sort of this cycle. So it's a huge emotional toll on people. So depending on what someone's coming to see me for, if it's just to sort of, they're just taking time, or they want to, ideally they're just trying to prep their body before, but if they're thinking it's taking a while, if they come to see me, it's that idea of, okay, what's the root imbalance? So what's going on? So it's working on finding out, diet, lifestyle, like their cycles, what's going on, what someone's cycle is like gives me a lot of information. If someone gets PMS, if it's short cycle, if it's, not a lot of flow, if they're, if it's irregular cycle, all that. So I can do a lot with, once I figure out what's going on, we treat that root imbalance and help the body. The idea is, like, there's a saying, we cultivate the soil before we plant the seed. So it's like this, we use that for farming, but also for the body. We want to make sure that the environment is right in order for the body to conceive, and then not only like conception, have like a healthy pregnancy, but also have a healthy baby and have a healthy mom after. So it's like all the different stages. So if it's just working with that, I would sort of work to find that root imbalance. If someone's going through fertility treatments because they have an issue, I'm going to work the same way. If someone's going through conventional cancer treatments, I'm going to work to support them through that process. So helping with any side effects if they're on medications, helping to optimize blood flow into the uterus and ovary. Ironically, again, we live in stressful times, and the fertility process, if someone's going through assisted reproductive stuff, can be incredibly stressful. And our bodies, when we're stressed, our bodies are incredibly wise, and they will shut down blood supply to areas that are deemed non-essential when we're stressed. Mm. And one of those non-essential places is the reproductive organ. Wow. So we actually have blood flow that goes, into our legs, but it will cut off the blood supply to our uterus and ovaries when we're stressed, because it's like, oh, we're trying to survive. And so that's kind of the exact opposite of what we want to do. So a lot of what I do is I'll work with people how to calm the nervous system down, help to redirect blood flow in through acupuncture, or I'll give women sort of massage techniques, that kind of stuff. We can do herbs to help, with lining, or the quality, and working with food. Like, food is one of the biggest things for quality of eggs as well. It has, like, I think, a 5-fold increase on egg quality. So, and then it's just, I think a lot of it's holding space for women too, because it can be, I think, a lot of the clinics can be very upsetting, or just full of a lot of people who are incredibly invested in having a child. And it can be, there's a lot of anxiety or stress, can be a lot of anxiety and stress in there. So people will come in, and ideally, there's a calm environment, and they'll often have a place where it's safe to talk about how they're feeling, and let out some of that emotion, but also with its idea of very empowering, what are the things that they can be doing at home? Because I think a lot of times with fertility, that it feels like it's out of their hand, but then recognizing what can they do. So I'm very, very, very big on empowering the person. And the thing is, it's once someone knows, they don't have to rely on me, they can trust themselves. And I think that getting back and being familiar with what your individual wisdom, like your wisdom compared to my wisdom, is going to be different because we're different people. And so I think the more I can empower someone with that, the better they fare.
Wow. So would that explain, I have a friend who, she had a long history having trouble having children, and then she did in vitro, and then after she had twins after she did in vitro, and then she got pregnant.
Yes.
So is it what you're saying about, like, the stress reducing the blood flow to, would that sort of be a possible explanation for that?
Yeah, huge. It happens a lot because we're just so focused on it, and that, the thing when people say go on vacation, I mean, it's so frustrating for someone to hear that, but the body, when it's relaxed, it's more receptive. And just think how we feel, right? When we're relaxed, I'm way more receptive to stuff than when I'm stressed. It's like, get away from me, I don't want to talk. Yeah. And so, but quite physiologically, like, what happens in our body, it does change when we're stressed. So it can be as simple as, adding meditation, breath work, breathing into the belly, doing a longer exhale than inhale. All those things calm our nervous system. And they can seem really simple, but they have a over time, they have a profound effect. So, but yeah, that's really common when people like their second comes sort of
Yeah.
unexpectedly.
Yeah, she was like, whoops.
Here we go.
Here we go again. Okay, so this has been a really lovely conversation. I want to talk about a couple more things. The first one is craniosacral therapy. So what is the kind of foundation of knowledge that inspires this kind of therapy? Like what is the significance of, the cranium and the sacrum for our kind of health?
There's a gentleman, John Upledger, who really pioneered this, and he was actually, I think, hired to prove that the skull didn't move, or there was this cranial rhythm, this expanding and contracting of the cerebral spinal fluid, like that it didn't actually happen. And he's like, whoops, it actually does. So it was through he sort of and figured out this, what was going on with the brain and the connection of the flow of this fluid, and also the sacrum and all the different the bones in the body. Sorry, that got not very articulate very fast. But okay. So he found that we used to think years ago that the bones in the head were fused and that nothing moved. Like once you're born and they kind of fused into this spot and nothing would affect it. And that's actually what our anatomy books said in like medical schools would say, oh, no, fused. And then that's the whole idea of like, no, whoops, they actually do move. And so what's happening is this expansion and contraction of the cerebral spinal fluid. So what goes in to feed our brain, the bones in the skull will go sort of in and out with that. So what happens sometimes through birth, through trauma, through like any kind of accident, concussions, one of those bones can get jammed, and so it's not expanding or contracting the way it should be, and so that can actually compress on the certain parts of the brain. So headaches, mood changes, all that, depending on where those bones are compressed. And so with craniosacral, one of the things we can do is this is when I'm working with concussions and things combined with the Chinese medicine, I find to be highly successful, is that we can, and it's very subtle and very gentle. That you can actually pull the bone that's been compressed or jammed out again, and so that is actually going to flow and move smoothly as it should. So and one of the things that what I love about the craniosacral is it can actually drop the body into that healing state. There's something called a still point. Something that we do is called a still point, which basically holds the body in this state of like holding a certain part of the head, so everything sort of pauses for a minute and the body drops into that healing state, so engages that parasympathetic nervous system, and that's where we get the real healing. So people can have, I combine this with my Chinese medicine. There are craniosacral therapists who will do a way better job of explaining this than but it is I find it to be an incredibly powerful tool, and it's just using the wisdom of the body, but also using the bones in the head and the sacrum and its sort of interaction, that whole spinal column working together to have sort of another way to get optimal functioning in the body.
Okay, so now I want to talk about cleansing, because I know that you do cleanses, but there's been, some recent criticism of cleanses as being a kind of massive, industry that's based on an ambiguous notion of toxins. This is coming from an article that I recently read, and this particular critic said that that toxin is never defined or described, and so their idea was that the body naturally detoxifies itself, and so we don't need any kind of special ascetic practice to get back on track, blah blah blah. So I know that you obviously have an educated perspective on cleanses. So can you kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, and tell us what is kind of BS and what is right about this whole cleansing business?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that we get so many trends, and I think that we have to be really, really sort of mindful and be a bit discerning with what information we take in, because again, this idea that no two people are the same, so no two prescriptions for healing are they going to be the same, diet or otherwise. So, and I think, our bodies do naturally detoxify, but then how we're living, that the toxic load can absolutely build up, and that's one of the components that's definitely prominent in like cancer for sure. So we have our detox organs, so our lungs, our skin, our digestive system, like our bowels and colon. So we're going to get rid of things that we don't need. Unfortunately, when our food has changed a lot, our environment has changed a lot over the years. So we have, pesticides on foods, toxic fumes that are coming in from our environment, chemicals that we're putting on our skin, plastics and things like that get into water. These aren't sort of natural for our bodies. These are not things that come from the earth necessarily. And living in cities and things like that, water, all the stuff that we put in, our bodies have to process them. So yeah, they can process a lot, but then you get things like eating poor quality of food, so decreased fiber. So what's happening is our bowels aren't as efficient at getting rid of things. People aren't sweating. They're not doing things to actually rid toxins from their body. Their breath is really short and shallow because we're stressed. So we're actually in that fight or flight state. So we're not actually using our detox organs well or optimally. And we have a lot of toxins coming in. So what happens if our body can't process the toxins? And the other thing too is we detox and we cleanse and we replenish at night. So if we're eating late at night, if we're not sleeping well, if we have fitful sleep, if all those things, then our bodies also aren't replenishing and recovering at nighttime. So you get all these different things. And so I think we do have so if we get this, we're not able to detox, then these toxins get stored in the body. So they get stored in the fats, they get stored in the digestive system. Then they're not actually being purged. And so cleansing can be a great idea, and just cutting the source of the toxins. I think we should always pay attention to what we're eating, what we're putting on our skin, and all that stuff. But so cutting the source. So I do say like cutting organic foods and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And maximizing the systems that are around detox. So great idea in theory. So where I get a little more specific is, generally speaking, we recommend cleansing in the spring only. The reason is it's the liver system. We're going from that heavier winter time into spring, lighter foods. We want to kind of move, and there's more movement that happens in spring. Winter time, we're supposed to be staying warm. We're wanting to actually keep, when people put on a little weight or animals store up for the winter to keep warm, to keep them going through that sort of darker, harder time. When we're cleansing, we're depleting ourselves often, and cleanses are often very cool in property. So that's why we should be changing our diet throughout the year. But also, if we're having raw foods, cold foods, frozen foods, and it's a time when it's very cold outside and we're wanting to stay warm, we're actually adding more cold in, so we can throw ourselves off balance. Also, not everyone should be, not all cleanses are created the same too. So some people do quite strong cleanses. So I think those should mostly be done in the springtime. You get someone who's very, very, we say excess, someone who's very hearty, very hot, very strong, very excess, a lot of phlegm, a lot of things like that stuff. They could probably handle a cleanse in the winter, and it probably wouldn't be bad if they're sort of in excess. But someone who's very depleted, so cold, weak, frail, getting sick all the time, congested, not sleeping very well, just not very doesn't have a lot of vitality. Those people should not be doing a hard cleanse, because it's going to deplete them too much. And so those people would do well with a very simple food cleanse, not adding a lot of extras in, and avoiding any of those, doing a cooked food cleanse. So just lightly steaming their vegetables, and maybe doing a little bit more building food while they're doing a bit of a cleanse. And so there's a whole spectrum of the type of cleanses you can do. And then you take the person and you've got to match it to the person. So that's why a pet peeve of mine when people are like, I'm going to do a juice cleanse for New Year's. I'm like, don't do that. Because it depends on the person, but we could end up feeling way worse after. Yeah. So, the things that if cleansing, little things to watch for is someone feeling really weak. They're feeling depleted. Their bowels are loose. They're getting congestion. They're getting frequent colds. They shouldn't be doing that. And so that's why I always say work with a practitioner, someone who knows your body, and can tailor it. So I think cleansing is good, but just be very mindful about how one does it.
Excellent. I love those beautiful chimes in the background.
Oh, I know.
It's kind of like marking the end of our interview.
There you go. Thank you.
So Angela, this has been really lovely. So I wanted to just end by giving you an opportunity to share a little bit of what you're doing, and I'll just and you know how people can find you and any workshops or anything that you're participating in. I will just mention to the audience that Angela is going to be participating in our upcoming online conference, Radical Therapies, which is more of what we've talked about, plus, you know, from a variety of different perspectives, but mostly all inspired in one way or another by the Eastern traditions. So Angela, of course, will be talking more about traditional Chinese medicine. That's happening from July 14th to the 16th, 2017. So if you're listening to this after that, well, if you're listening to this before that, you can sign up by going to radtherapies.embodiedphilosophy.com, radtherapies.embodiedphilosophy.com. And if you are wanting to listen to Angela's talk, but this is after the date that launches, just there will be access to that after the fact on our website. So just check out our website for that. So Angela, you know, besides that, what else are you up to that you want to share with the audience?
Oh, okay. Well, I have a private practice, so I do see people in my clinic, and I also do Skype consultations with people if they want to look at sort of that whole person-based approach to healing with using Chinese medicine. And upcoming, I'm going to be doing a few courses bringing in the next year. One of my big things that I'm working on right now is wise woman aging, so a healthy menopause, because I think it's so needed. Yeah. So if anyone's interested in that, they can contact me, and I can let them know when the course will be available.
Excellent. And they can find you at angelawarburton.com.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Well, this has been a real pleasure, Angela, and I'm looking forward to watching your talk for the conference coming up.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
All right. Talk to you soon, Angela.